So first, everybody, want to thank you guys for joining us, and we want to jump into the conversation today. We're here with Amos Thiongo, who is joining us from Conservation International, which is a fellow environmental organization we are partners in the field and friends with Conservation International. So we're really happy to have Amos here with us. And we want to focus today on the idea of grasslands and rangelands. And so just a few moments ago, I had a chance to speak with Amos about, what can that mean? What does that mean for us? And I think he will be a great person to share a little bit about what we're talking about. But some of the overview for today, anyhow, is we want to talk about, what rangeland means, what grassland means, what are some of the big trends throughout Africa, what's going on with businesses on those kind of landscapes. Additionally, we might hear about a few success stories from different businesses on those landscapes. We want to then take a second at some point to ask you guys, what landscapes you're working on. So we'll do a poll later on that. And then we also want to hear a little bit about some of the cool things that CI is doing for rangeland-based businesses. And this is currently right now in Kenya and South Africa. But just because you might not be based in Kenya or South Africa, don't tune out, because these kind of programs are starting to get traction. They're starting to be enacted in different countries around the world by partners like Conservation International, World Resources Institute, and more. So I think that some of the lessons that Amos is going to share with us today are going to be applicable to businesses, regardless of what country you're in. So we also, I'm not sure, we might have a representative from Agar Limited today. Tommaso was telling me someone might join us. So if so, you can just let me know. And if I can tell you what Agar means, I just need 1 second. Hold on. Agar is African Agency for Arid Resources Limited. And if there's somebody here, they can also chime in anytime that they would like to. And if not, we're definitely going to have Tommaso joining us as a peer group presenter later on this time around. I see that in the chat box, maybe some people aren't signed on for the interpretations yet. So I'm sure that Joel is doing a great job. So please be sure to click on the interpretations if you need that by going to the globe in the bottom and selecting French or English. Vous pouvez sélectionner français ou anglais dans le globe comme tout le temps. C'est la même chose, quelque chose. Okay, so now, Amos, I want to introduce you. So thanks so much for joining us today, Amos. Perhaps you could start by telling us a little bit about, let's see, what your role is at Conservation International, and then maybe a little bit about your history and how you ended up kind of making your journey towards that role, whichever order you want, just to get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amanda, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, apologies. I'm taking this call from my car. I was en route from the field. I thought I would make it to a decent place where I could take the call. But you know what happens when you're out there, you get stuck, and here I am. So hopefully the network will be good enough. So yeah, my name is Amos Thiongo. I work for Conservation International, based here in Nairobi in our Africa regional office. And my role within Conservation International is I work within what we call Conservation Finance team. And Conservation Finance team, basically, we mostly do what I would call non-grant kind of interventions. So it's mostly a range of things, whether it's debt, whether it's investment, whether it's technical assistance facilities. We mostly work in the interface between communities, conservation, and the private sector. So there's that whole interface, how do we have, businesses thriving, communities thriving, but also the environment thriving. That's what I do. But basically, before I come to the rangeland space and grasslands, I was born in Laikipia, county of Kenya, for those who are from Kenya know. And Laikipia is a semi-arid area, and it's mostly a grassland, semi-arid, and mostly it's livestock keeping. So we do a bit of agriculture, and when we were lucky, our maize and beans would grow, but that used to happen probably once in 3 or 4 years. But mostly we used to depend on livestock. And I remember it was this grassland with a lot of grass, and I would go looking after my father's cows when I was young as 8. So the other thing about Laikipia is that it's a high wildlife area. So we used to have all these conflicts with lions and elephants and name it. So I grew in that, and yeah, I got immersed into this ecosystem where you are interacting between livestock. There's this whole livestock wildlife conflict. There's the issue of degradation. There's the issue of climate change and drought that used to keep recurring. So I grew in that, and it's something I wanted to do. So I joined Conservation International about.
Oh, excuse me, Amos, 1 second. Our interpretation is not working, Joelle. We are not hearing you on the French channel, and I just turned on the French channel, so I will wait until I can hear you on the French channel. Sorry, Amos, our French-speaking colleagues are not hearing the interpretation. Let me see if Joelle, maybe her connection was bad and she got kicked off. Yeah, I'm seeing that Joelle is not online right now. So I would expect that she will be joining back soon, and I will send her a WhatsApp message in the meantime. Let me write to her. Okay, so everybody, I think we're just gonna have to go on until Joelle comes back. I'll be watching for her. Je voudrais dire apologies, non, c'est comment ça dit. I don't know how to speak French very well. Mais Joël, ce n'est pas ici pour ce connexion. Nous avons parlé en anglais, mais Joël, we're going to turn it on when we can. I don't know how to say it all. I think you get the point. Okay, so we're going to continue with Amos, and when I see the interpreter rejoin, we will restart interpretation. Okay, thanks, Amos. Sorry, you were just getting to, maybe you were discussing your history growing up on a rangeland. Beans are only growing maybe every 3 days. And this was maybe the way life is, and that might have led you to look into the line of work you're in right now.
Yeah, thanks, and I hope the French translation works. I have zero French. Yeah.
Amanda, please, can you
yes.
reset me as an interpreter, please?
Yes, okay, she's there. So let's do this. Hold on, it's coming up, everybody. And update. Okay, now you should be able to select interpretation with French. Maintenant,
okay, pour ceux qui sont deux.
Vous pouvez con le français maintenant. Okay. Ready to go, Amos. Thank you. And thank you, Joelle.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so back to my journey. When I was growing up, and when it rained in Laikipia County, the grass would grow very high. And actually, you'd have to be on top of a tree to take care of your father's cows, because I was probably 4 feet, 5 feet, probably 4 feet tall. But the grass would be so high that you'd need to be on top of a tree to see the cows. And that's what we used to do. Like, we would take care of the cows when we were on top of trees. And as years went by, that changed totally. Today, again, for those who are from this part of the world, no, even if it rains, the grass barely grows 2 feet tall. It doesn't matter what kind of rain. And that's as a result of a combination of many factors. So one is the big thing about degradation, like the breakdown of the plant grazing system, and grass getting hammered, overgrazed, and then losing the topsoil when it rains, because it's bare soil, and then losing even the seed that is in the soil because of many years of no regeneration and everything. So that has changed, and the grasslands or the rangelands of Kenya, of East Africa, of Southern Africa have gotten degraded over the years. My interest in this was how can we restore part of this, and from a professional background, how can we make business? It's only going to be sustainable if there's some kind of benefit or long-term benefit that businesses, the people, and the environment can get from this. So that's my background. That's how I got into this. I don't know whether to stop there or just go ahead in terms of what kind of interventions are in place.
Oh, we can stop there a little bit. I think that probably your story is resonating with a lot of people, and something that sticks out for me is like the need to tell the story about where it came from. The grass used to be 4 or 5 foot tall, that to me that says, there used to be enough, to feed the cows. There used to be enough to have the livelihood, and just hearing your background on how that's changed over the years. Now the grass is not growing 2 feet no matter what, if you're lucky, and the different trends that have allowed that to happen. It's just so important, because I think we need to get back to the kind of biomass, the kind of grasses that you were discussing, in order to have a prosperous future in Africa. So I just wanted to share that really stuck out to me, and I'm thinking that probably other people have similar stories if they're old enough, and if they're not quite old enough, they only see what we have right now. So the storytelling is important. Also want to let people know as well, when you have questions or comments anytime, feel free to put them in the chat boxes, and at appropriate times, we will invite you to speak those kinds of comments and chats as well. So the chat box is always there for you, and then we will open it up to be more interactive as well throughout this. So yes, good to hear about, the motivations for getting involved. And I think maybe you were going to jump on to the next topic, which was going to be some interventions that you might have seen that have been working.
Thanks so much, Amanda. And certainly I am sure people can relate into how things has changed over time. And I can imagine it's a big challenge of our times, particularly probably it's also a big opportunity of our times if we can rise to the occasion. But probably then shifting gears a bit in terms of what I've seen, and Amanda, just before this call we were discussing, saying maybe we should not just limit ourselves to grasslands, because I think I see grasslands as a core part of rangelands. And if somebody asks me what is the definition of rangelands, probably the jury is out there in terms of what is the best definition. But in my thinking, it's a land use practice. It's not a biome. It's a land use practice, and it's a land use practice in arid and semi-arid areas, where we have grasslands, but also we have scrublands or even woodlands. So it's quite wide. But one of the interesting things in Africa, in terms of the land use, it's quite common. It's mostly communal livestock keeping, whether it's pastoralism, nomadism, or whatever, but it's sort of communal livestock kind of systems. But then the other interesting thing, it's also where most of our wildlife is. If you talk about all the mega fauna, the elephants, the lions, the cheetahs, they're mostly in these rangelands. And basically these communities that live here, like my ancestors have lived with this wildlife for centuries, so they know how to do it, and they used to coexist. But then the question is, what has happened that all of a sudden we have all these challenges? These communities used to keep livestock for generations. Then what happened all of a sudden? Now, there's degradation and loss of pasture. So it's interesting. That's what I'm saying. It's a big challenge of our times, particularly a big opportunity. And probably also, coming back to Africa, the context of Africa is, and again, probably it's depending on the literature you look at, it's 43% arid or semi-arid. or 43% rangelands. So if you look like Eastern Africa, going all the way to Southern Africa, it's mostly rangelands. Probably some parts of West Africa, it's mostly rangelands, and it's the same kind of communal livestock context. And about 200 million or so people live in these rangelands, in these areas. So it's also very important because that's a huge population. But then the other interesting bit is most of these areas are sort of low population density, and in many cases politically neglected. They do not get the attention because they are low population density. They don't get the attention, and it's not a place where there's a lot of investment in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education, in terms of healthcare. They are mostly neglected areas. So in many places, rangelands are perceived as wastelands, like just being there, useless land, because it's arid and semi-arid, unlike tropical forest and everything. But then I think that is like the next biggest frontier for development. And I think that's why I say it's a big opportunity, because if you look into the value of natural products in the rangelands, I think it's just huge. If you look at the value of livestock, the extensive livestock and how much it contributes to the GDPs of these countries, I think it's just huge. So there is a huge opportunity here, and that's why at Conservation International we decided to sort of intervene in these areas that are highly degraded, but equally that are a big opportunity. And we started our work in South Africa in a place called Namakwaland, which is a succulent karoo, a very interesting biome. And just how do you work with communities there that are mostly, they keep small livestock, sheep and goats? How do you support them to go back to the traditions of plant grazing system, the rotation, so that the land has sufficient regeneration time? But equally, how do you enable them to access the market? And accessing the market is making sure that they are producing what buyers want, really, the right breeds, the right size, the right age, and being organized in that buyers can access them. So how do you do that? And we learned very many lessons, some of them very painful lessons in terms of what works and what doesn't work. And just and then after Namakwaland, we shifted to Eastern Cape Province, and then into Kruger, outside Kruger National Park area. And one of the interesting things that we realized is just by organizing people and taking the indigenous knowledge in terms of how things used to happen and how they used to take care of the land, and bringing on board science and intervention, then you actually come up with very interesting models. For example, one of the things that happened in Namakwaland is that, of course, because of modernization and everybody keeping their own sheep and goats, there was no collective action. Like, there would be these people, we call them brokers or speculators, who would come and buy 1 sheep from you, 2 goats from the other person, 5 from the other person, and they would actually used to like really push down the prices because you need to sell, and they are buying. But what Conservation International started doing is actually organizing the farmers to have 1 market day every month. And they would register that I have 2 goats, I have 5 sheep, I have this number, and then let's bring them to a central market on every first Saturday of the month. And then instead of having the brokers, we would actually have the end buyers, the people slaughtering in Cape Town and elsewhere, come. And it became so successful for 2 reasons. Number one, now the brokers were getting cut out, in that I would now sell basically to the end buyer at a better price. So the farmers were happy, but equally the buyers were happy because I would just go into this one marketplace, and there's a 500 sheep, so I can buy as many as I want, and it's so it's an open market. So one young lady saw an opportunity here, a business opportunity. So actually he decided, like, instead of this being NGO driven, why can't I start it as a business? whereby I will be organizing the auctions myself. Yeah. So instead of this marketplace being conducted by an NGO, which after, you know, what happens with NGOs, it's a 3 or 5 year project, then they go. Instead of that, why don't I start a business whereby actually my job is just to organize this marketplace, the auction. I will be registering all the farmers that want to sell. I will be mobilizing and communicating with the buyers. I will be setting up all the facilities that are required during the auction day. And then for each and every sale, I earn a 2% commission. And they started, that's how it started. And then it grew and they registered a company called Meat Naturally, PTY. Let me see whether I can type that. But Meat Naturally, PTY. I'll even give them the website. And that has become a big phenomenon in South Africa, in that now Meat Naturally is a big business that, and what they do is they just organize auctions for livestock keepers. And then they mobilize the market who come and buy. And then for each and every sale, they earn a 2% commission. But there's some condition to it. For Meat Naturally PTY to come and organize in your community, you must subscribe to particular production protocols. You must agree to subscribe to a planned grazing system because we want to restore the land. You must agree to have some kind of animal husbandry practice because we want to improve the quality of your livestock. And then eventually there's some kind of other veterinary protocols you have to subscribe to. So what has happened is, of course, farmers are earning much more money because now they are selling directly to the buyers. Number two, because of the adoption of sustainable practice like planned grazing system, rotational grazing, and then eventually, so for that, the land is regenerating, and there's a whole science behind it, behind the planned grazing system. Of course, there's a bit of interventions, for example, water provision that is required for that to work. So in this case, the land is getting regenerated and it's getting better. So farmers are happy because there's actually more grass than used to be a few years ago. And then eventually for the businesses, the buyers are so happy because eventually they'll know that this Saturday we are in this part of the country, the following Saturday will be in the other part of the country. And then, yeah, so it's very easy for them to source instead of them waiting for the brokers to collect, amalgamate, and bring to them. So that has been a business that grew organically from, a need for restoration. Yep. Amanda, let me stop at this point and see whether there's any comment, question.
Sure. Let me see. I do have a few questions right here, and we're seeing some really interesting stuff in the chat box as well. But I just wanted to say, this sounds pretty inspiring, and maybe anyone there who is working in the rangelands or places where there's a lot of meat growing, goats, cows, things like that, could be a model that you might want to pick up yourself. Also, as we're going to look in the chat box, I'm going to launch a poll so that we can see what type of land your business works on. So I just put a few. It's not really that scientific, but just to see what the people here are working on. So you can go ahead and look at the poll. So far, just one person has voted. So I hope more people will be voting soon. We've got 2, and we can see in a few seconds what the breakdown of the audience here is, what kind of land that they identify with, where they have their business models. So going back to the chat boxes, let's see, people are usually a little quiet at first and then they get going. But I did see a couple of questions, so I just wanted to put it to you. Very technical, but interesting as well. People are saying fodder. What do you see as trends in fodder? What kind of trees or agroforestry systems might you have been seeing in your work so far? And I think the entrepreneurs here are going to take note of that.
Yeah, a very interesting question. Again, depending on the kind of livestock system you are dealing with. So if you are dealing with the extensive livestock system, the pastoralism, where you have hundreds and hundreds of cattle, it becomes very difficult to do like fodder trees because, you need a lot of biomass. So certainly that becomes a bit difficult. But one of the things I've seen, again, actually there is a business I saw in Botswana where they are using the invasive acacia species. I can't remember what acacia species it is. And actually they are chipping it and using it as fodder. So in this case, if you can have these invasive species that are occupying hundreds and hundreds of hectares, then chip them and prepare them into fodder. But in terms of like from an extensive livestock system, it's very difficult to grow tree as fodder. It's easy to grow grass because then the cows will eat grass right from there instead of you feeding them. But of course, when it's dry, you will see people on top of trees and chopping different branches for different acacia trees and everything. But then from an intensive livestock system where you are doing zero grazing or semi-intensive grazing and you have 10, 15 cows or this number of goats, then there's a lot of agroforestry trees. And yeah, I must confess, it's also not my area in terms of the intensive part of agriculture. But then there is the Leucaena species. There's the mulberry species. I can certainly, if you look, for example, into the World Agroforestry Center and may type that, ICRAF, they do lots and lots of research in terms of fodder or multiple use kind of trees. So I'm sure you can get a lot of literature there. Thank you.
Yeah, very important. And also, yes, Emmanuel asks particularly about the Leucaena plants that you talked about. And let's see if there's any other kind of questions in here that might be interesting. There's some in French that I'll have to translate. Yeah, we got forage question coming up a lot. So that's interesting. We also have a company called meatnaturallyafrica.com. I wonder if Emmanuel, if I could invite Emmanuel from meatnaturallyafrica.com to share just a small bit about his meat business or what he might have maybe noticed from Amos's discussion so far. Only if you'd like to. I don't know if he's available or not. So I'm just throwing it out there.
Amanda, thank you very much. I just posted the link. This is the organization Amos was mentioning. So we're unfortunately not doing, but interested to do something similar in Zambia. So this was just the organization he was pointing out. Very interesting, and Amos would be happy to learn more about it. Sounds like a great initiative. We want to also pick up in Zambia. Thank you, Amanda.
Oh, no, thank you too for sharing about that. And
yeah, that's Amanda. Yeah, and Emmanuel, certainly at this Meat Naturally. And actually, we the company is now getting into Zambia, specifically into the Simalaha area, working with some of the conservancies. I don't know which part of Zambia, Emmanuel, you come from, but certainly Zambia is a country of interest as well for Meat Naturally Pty at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, Amos, perfect. Sounds great. That must be Peace Park Foundation. I'm aware of the conservancy. We're in southern moving into Zambia.
So very exciting. And we can keep this open for a couple seconds longer if someone has another comment so far. So what I do now is go back to the poll and share with people. We had 71% of the participants here fill this out. And just interesting to note, I'm not sure if everybody can see that, but we had, and now some of these are kind of overlapping. So this was just how people identified their businesses. We've got 24% on the semi-arid land, 13 in grassland, one person working on the arid land. We have 11 of 38 people working in tropical. We have 10 people say they're working on a mixture of areas, and that they might be sourcing from various different locations. And we've got 2 people who said other. So a little bit spread out, but kind of as you might expect, with people working strongly on tropical, but also on grasslands, arid and semi-arid lands. So I just wanted to share that. I see Florence with the hand. Florence, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I want to ask Amos a question. Basically, being a Kenyan and we work in the arid areas in this country, Amos, there are times in Kenya when the weather is extremes, like in areas like Turkana, Northeastern, and all that. How would this initiative be rolled to such places? Because I think we lose lots of livestock there, and if there was a model which would, can I say, revive the lands there, as much as there is a lot of desertification?
Yeah, thanks, Florence. And certainly, rangelands and drylands are very risky, especially from a climate perspective. I think they bear the biggest risk in terms of the weather variance. It's raining, it's dry, we have floods. Yeah. So certainly, there are a couple of things that are being tried. I can't say they've been perfected yet, but they're being tried. So one of them is how do you grow fodder? Growing and harvesting and keeping when you have a lot of rain, grow fodder. And by growing is by, in this case, we prefer using indigenous grass species. For example, if you go to the Kajiado area towards Loitoktok, there's a lot of work that is going on in terms of growing fodder from the Maasai love grass and then harvesting it and keeping it. Yeah. And trying to spread this such that each and every livestock keeper, each and every farmer has 3, 4, 5 acres of fodder that they grow, harvest, just using the usual like simple methods of sickle, harvesting and making hay and keeping it. Doing that for the dry season, because you can be sure that the dry season is coming. So that is one. And what happens is it has the dual impact that people get fodder. Particularly, they can also harvest the grass seed itself, the seed itself, and use it to reseed other areas that are totally like degraded. And there's a lot to that effect in terms of doing it and commercializing. And actually what happens is there's a huge market. I'm sure, Florence, you've seen trucks and trucks of hay nowadays traversing the country. So there's a huge hay market at the moment. And I think that's something that people can try. And actually we are at CIB in the process of developing some kind of business cases of commercializing fodder from dry areas. How can we commercialize that and how people do it as a business? So certainly it would be good to see whether there are some entrepreneurs who are interested in going to that space, given that the land is, leasing land is very, very cheap in these areas, and they are very, very fertile, and you need 3 or 4 months of rain for you to grow and harvest. So that is one. The other thing is also insurance, and this is looking at financial incentives that can be put in place so that people insure their livestock. And there is now the climate risk insurance. There are so many service providers in the market at the moment, and I can imagine that cuts across many other different countries, where you can insure your livestock, you can insure your crops. But then eventually, again, from more an intervention perspective, it's also the uptake. If we can forecast that the drought is coming, why don't we buy the livestock from, of course, there's an issue of culture there in terms of people willingness to sell, but then people are changing their perspective in those areas and really commercializing this. If we are anticipating that the droughts are coming, why don't we offer the incentive of people selling the livestock so that they can be slaughtered and be made into meat, so that when the drought comes, then there's less of a loss. So certainly, I guess it's different things in different places, but certainly there is some things that are being tried across different countries. Thank you. And I can imagine a country like Botswana has been quite a leader in terms of trialing, climate risk insurance, and I think they are making really, really good strides. But then there's also some kind of government intervention there as well. But I'm sure it's something that if our governments wanted, they could do. But then, of course, yeah, there is a lot of private sector that is involved in it now. I hope that responds to you, Florence.
Yeah, interesting discussion. Thank you.
So Amos, I might want to I'll turn the mic back to you and just see, did you have another topic planned right now? I think we talked about one success story. Did you have another one that you wanted to share?
Yes, probably before I even share, one of the other things we do is, if you look at rangelands and we have communities that live there, and these communities are doing different things. So probably the biggest thing is that they are livestock keepers. Particularly, they're also involved in other activities. Some of them are also doing this and that economic activities. But then there's also the issue of tourism. In many of these places, we have these community conservancies, and we have the private sector who've invested there in tourism. So it's a combination of things. The other very interesting thing, and it's emerging as a big opportunity, is carbon from restored rangelands. So if, and again, I'm also not a carbon expert, but if an area is totally degraded, it's assuming this community that owns these 100,000 hectares of land, and they've totally degraded this land over many years. There's no grass, the soil is so poor, there's no trees because, that means there's not even carbon that is being kept in the soil, that's being sequestered in the soil. And there's a big opportunity because these lands are vast. 100,000 hectares is so huge. So what happens if you can work with this community to restore this area so that there's, grass can come back? What happens is that when grass comes back, grass normally will sequester its carbon in the roots, in the soil. So that means you are building soil carbon stock. I know there's a lot of science behind it. There's been a lot of measurements and everything that actually you can sell that soil carbon in the carbon markets. I know most of us are very familiar with the REDD+ carbon from forest, from deforestation and forest degradation, but now the soil carbon is also becoming a big opportunity in some of these areas, and I think probably it's like the biggest frontier for the carbon markets, and that's a very interesting revenue stream for the communities. Yeah, but coming back in terms of other opportunities, and possibly I mentioned this in the coming back to Kenya, in the Maasai areas of Kajiado, around Loitoktok. So we've been working with some women groups. This is an area that has very fertile soils, but it's too dry and it's been degraded for many years. So we've been working with these women groups, and as we all know that in the Maasai communities, women do not own livestock. The livestock is owned by the men. And then what has happened, and of course there are lots of gender issues there, but let's not go into them. So what has happened is because there's a lot of land, so we negotiated with the men, like, you own all this land, it's vast pieces of land, why don't you set aside X number of hectares and just allocate it to the women to use, not to buy or to do anything, but to use, and agree that your livestock will not be driven into those parcels of land. So in each and every village, they were able to set aside about 15 hectares of land, and the men happily did, because 15 hectares out of a few thousands is not much. What these women did is they did some bit of fencing, just using shrubs, but then because of the community had agreed that they were not going to drive the livestock, so it was safe in that way. And these women were supported to plant grass. In these, in these pieces, they would plow and they would plant grass, and then they would do the beehive fencing to keep away the elephants, but also to harvest the honey. So what happened is after 4 months, this grass was mature, it was grown, and these women actually harvested the seeds, the grass seed, because they had used one particular grass species. They harvested, and in each and every, they were able to harvest 1,000 or between 1,000 to 1,500 kilos of grass seed. But besides that, they also harvested the fodder and baled it into hay. So what these women did is that, of course, they kept the hay in a big store. And then when it was so dry, they were able to sell this hay back to their husbands and men in the community, but also to anyone who was going to buy. And of course, we were selling it at a highly subsidized price. Instead of the conventional 200 per bale, they decided to sell it at 100, which was okay. And that was big. The men loved it because anyway, they were going to buy hay. But secondly, the big thing, the gold here was the grass seed, the seed itself. There's a huge demand for grass seed at the moment, either for people who want to like plant commercially and harvest, but also for restoration. So at the moment, the government, the county government, the NGOs, everybody is looking for grass seed. If you go to any shop in the moment, you will find seed from particular species, but you'll not find seed from indigenous species. And what happened at the end of the day is that these women were able to make in excess of, each group making somewhere between $20,000 to $25,000. And the model then was that they were, they would buy, they would keep a bit of the seed and they would expand. And it's becoming such a big business in that community. What is now happening is now men are getting into it because they've seen the big opportunity. And I hope then that becomes like an enterprise then grows, that area becomes known as the source of, hay and fodder. So that's another example of a business model that started as a women group thing, but because of meeting demand, it's now grown to something big. And remember now, what happens is that they're getting seed that they can use to regenerate or to reseed other areas that have been degraded. That's good for the environment. But then they are now having hay that they can sell, that they can use for their own livestock, pulling pressure, a bit of rangelands.
Well, I think that sounds super exciting. And could you remind us what country that was in again?
Oh, sorry, that was in Kenya.
In Kenya.
I mean, that was with the Maasai community in Kenya.
Oh, fantastic. Because I've been lucky enough to go by the Maasai area, and you see what you see by the road is grass. It's like this high. And I see the skinny little goats and I feel so bad. So I'm so glad that there's an amazing initiative that's happening there. And you've preempted some of the chat questions here. So we were talking about fodder before, and in the chat box, I've been seeing things come up where people are saying, where can we get good grass seed? What grass seed would you recommend? How do I select the grass? So I'm seeing people are wanting to grow grass as well. And they said, are there trials with elephant grass? Is there a good list of grass species? Are you aware, Amos, of any, maybe any resources online that people can look up to identify a good grass species for their region?
Yeah, thanks. And number one, I'm a conservationist.
Oh, yes, okay.
Mm-hmm. So in that, I always advocate for indigenous, what is native to this place, because you don't want to introduce a problem. So it's important to know what is native, and once you know, then you can work from there. But having said that, again, there are institutions like International Livestock Research Institute, and they have like so much literature in terms of grass species from different, I think they've mapped grass species all over the world. So they have tons and tons of research in terms of, grass species. And remember, if you're a livestock keeper, grass is not just grass, because you are looking at issues of palatability. Do your livestock like it? Because there are some grasses that livestock don't like. But then you're also looking at issues of nutritional value, because some grasses are just as good as useless. But then you're also looking at issues of resilience and suitability to that agroeconomic zone. So it's a number of things. So yeah, palatability, nutritional value, and suitability to that agroeconomic zone. Yeah, so one of the things I really discourage, if you are
join the meeting, they ask you to join via audio or
Yeah, okay. So if you are doing it from like a small scale, plot, and I have 1 or 2 acres, and that definitely you can do within a species. I know, again, coming here in Kenya, there is a grass fish called bomber rods. Let me type that, and it's very popular with commercial livestock keepers. Yeah, but I would really discourage it if you are doing it from like a rangeland space where planting it on thousands and thousands of hectares, because there's the possibility it can become invasive, and then you would be creating more problems than good. And that also, that also applies to, agroforestry, especially if you're looking at fodder trees. It's also good to understand whether a particular species has the potential to overrun and become invasive. Many of you might be aware of this tree. It's actually an acacia species, it came from Australia, and it was planted in different parts, of Africa. And it's now a huge problem in South Africa at the moment. It's become a big invasive species. Remember, people who brought it had good intentions in terms of agroforestry, but now it's become such a huge issue. And the likes of prosopsis and others that were brought here for good reasons, but then eventually they became a big challenge. So I think it's also important to have a bit of science in terms of what are the colonization tendencies of a particular species before you introduce.
Yes, so I'm hearing that that there are different things that people should consider. First of all, first look to indigenous species. Oh, sorry, Amos, I think I cut you off. There was a delay. Sorry. Indigenous, can the cows, will they eat it? Will it be nutritional? And will it survive in your zones? So I would perhaps encourage folks here to look with their local extension services, like their national, like KEFRI in Kenya, other kinds of organizations like that exist in your country, to find out what that is. But it sounds like, even this is a business model that people who have, like you said, a hectare or 2 could even get into themselves, or maybe they could get together with their neighbors, like you said, and they did 15 hectares and really kickstarted a new business model around grass seeds and around hay creation that could help support the areas during times of drought. So I see we're getting to maybe our last 8 minutes. I want to give Levis a chance in the end, but I wanted to share some of the exciting programs that Conservation International is having in Kenya and South Africa, so that people can see the kinds of opportunities if they happen to be located in those countries. But if not, these kinds of programs might be coming to you soon, with additional interest that donors are showing in this area, and just with additional partnerships that are going around. So I know that when we were catching up before this call, Amos, we were talking about Conservation International has an investment arm. They have a technical assistance kind of program, and they're also launching or running some microfinance programs. So I wonder if you could share quickly, maybe we could start with the microfinance programs. How is it different than existing microfinance programs in Kenya or South Africa? And how are farmers benefiting from it? And what kind of loans are they getting? How much are the loans? What size are they? And what are they being used for?
Thanks so much. And yeah, I note your question, Florence. I'll get in touch with you. Thanks, Amanda. So for the microfinance, basically, as a conservation organization, our return on investment is the conservation impact. Unlike anyone else who's in business and they are looking for profit of other things, our primary return on investment is the environmental impact. So that makes it different in that we are willing to forego any kind of returns for the environmental impact. Anything else is a bit subordinate to that. So when we are working on, and again, as an NGO, we cannot go out giving out loans, especially to farmers, at the micro level. So normally we work with the microfinance institutions who we do wholesale, and then we agree on terms and conditions. And for us is that go operate this at very, very, very minimal return to us. as long as you are landing on environmental commitments by these farmers. You are lending that farmers will adopt plant grazing system, and there'll be a way of monitoring that. You are lending to people who are doing agroforestry, and there's a way of monitoring that. You are lending to people who are doing ABCD. It's mostly organized groups. They're not individuals, it's cooperatives and organized groups, but then they must have those commitments on environmental impact. At the moment, for example, in Kenya, we have a big project that is working in the rangelands in the
For me,
hill. Sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. It was just out for a couple of seconds. Now we can.
Oh, sorry.
No
yeah,
problem.
sorry. Being by the road. Yeah, so we're having a project where we are working with communities in the Chulu Hills, that is Kajiado, Taita Taveta, and Makueni. And then in the Tana River area, Tana River, Kitui, Tarakaniti, but also up north around Isiolo, Marsabit, and that's what we are doing. We are offering microfinance, and equally in Southern Africa, in South Africa, in Namakwaland, in Eastern Cape, Mzimvumbu catchment. So that is one.
So you guys are working with microfinance institutions to create products specifically to encourage loans to environmentally friendly companies. So that's interesting. Let's see, maybe you can discuss either your technical assistance programs or your investment arm of CI.
Yeah, thanks. So that's one. So secondly, for businesses or big companies, here we talk about the early growth kind of SMEs. We have an investment facility. We have an arm called CI Ventures, and CI Ventures is an independently registered company, but fully owned by CI, the NGO. And here we do debt investment. And our ticket size is somewhere between $200,000 to $500,000. Our sweet spot is around $350. And we do debt for between 6 months for somebody who's looking for working capital, up to about 5 years for somebody who's looking for capex. And certainly, again, our primary objective or primary return on investment is the environmental impact. So in that case, we are foregoing our own return. So we can really negotiate. So we say it's somewhere between 3 to 8%. But if you can demonstrate to us that you can achieve big environmental impact, then we go as low as 3. But then it's something negotiable. And sometimes actually we come up with some kind of an incentive mechanism where we tell you, if you meet this milestone, we discount. If you meet this milestone, we discount. So yeah, CI Ventures is active in Kenya nationally and in South Africa, and looking to go into Zambia. We are investing in various sectors, so agriculture, extensive livestock, tourism, fisheries, forestry. So again, it's also quite wide in terms of the sectors of investment. And then, so that's CI Ventures. Then finally, where we implementing projects just like any other NGO, we have a lot of technical assistance facilities where we are working to, to support enterprises within communities by the technical skills, but also by, offering small grants. And in that, it's very wide. It could be in Kenya, South Africa, Zambia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, so many other places. Thank you.
So I think these are all really interesting and important. We'd like to invite you, if you can, to join us for our venture presentation day. It's going to be in October virtually. So Samuel and I will be sure to let you know, but we'll have 15 of the entrepreneurs here presenting. And, basically we can network with you later on to figure out best ways, for folks in the pipeline when the time is right to apply, because pipeline is everything, and we're really excited about the opportunities you shared. So I see that we are almost towards the end. Everybody's saying, how about Nigeria? How about DRC? How about Mozambique? And I know we all want to be everywhere, but we're going to be working together. I say we in the bigger sense of, folks like WRI, Conservation International throughout Africa. And also I think Teiko is on the line and he can attribute to that Teiko's from the African Union, NEPAD, NEPAD, what is it? Teiko, if you'd like to step up and say anything, I don't know if he's still there, I didn't check. But we are going to be, all of our partners are working together to get more opportunities to even additional countries over the next couple of years. But we want to thank you, Amos. It's getting dark where you are. It's time for you to get home. So I think everybody can see that. I want to come up with a way for people to perhaps follow up with you with questions. So what I'm going to do is ask everybody who has questions to stay on the line a few seconds longer, and I'm going to put a link to a Google form, and then I can send all the questions to you, Amos, and it'll have everybody's contact information, and we can follow up that way. So Amos, I do want to let you go though, because I see it's dark where you are, and anyone who has a question, just stay on for literally one more second, and I will get that form in the chat box so that you can be sure to register your question as well as your contact information so that we can follow up with Amos in that way. So Amos, I want to thank you. Any kind of closing remarks, however, before you drive off into the night?
No, but many thanks to you, Amanda. Many thanks to everyone. And yeah, looking forward to interacting with all of you and, continuing with all the good work we are doing. But as I said, I think the African rangelands are our next big frontier for development. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. So Amos, see you, good night. And everybody, I'm gonna just take a few more seconds to create that. So if you wanted to write that, I'll just need a few seconds to focus here. Bye, Amos, thank you. To focus.